Hi, my name's Simon Michael, and no, I am not wearing fancy dress. I'm a barrister, and this is standard barrister's garb. So that includes a horsehair wig, introduced by Charles II when he came over from France in the 17th century, and a black robe. A black because the court went into mourning after the death of Queen Anne, and we've never come out of mourning ever since. That's what they call tradition. I have another job too, and that's writing crime thrillers based upon my career at the bar and some of the cases that I have done. But unfortunately, neither of my professions is operating properly at the moment. The courts are closing because of coronavirus, and for the same reason, all my speaking engagements at literary festivals and so on have been cancelled. So, I've decided that to fill my time, and yours if you're interested, I'm going to read the first of the books in instalments, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, upload each instalment to YouTube, and you can treat it as a free audiobook if you like. I'm going to start with the brief, set in 1960 London, the time of the craze and the corrupt Metropolitan Police. I hope you enjoy them. Part 1, Chapter 1. The clerk's room is its usual frenetic 5 o'clock worst. Stanley is holding conversations with 2 solicitors on different phones. Sally is fending off questions from 2 members of Chambers while scanning the daily cause list. And Robert, the junior, is optimistically trying to tie a brief with one hand while pouring a cup of coffee for the head of Chambers with the other. Sir Geoffrey Duchesne, QC, returned from the Court of Appeal 10 minutes earlier, muttering that Lord Bloody Justice Bloody Bucket is to the law of marine insurance what Bambi is to quantum physics. He ejected another barristers' conference already in progress from his room and slammed the door. He can still be heard giving a post-mortem of the day's defeat to the senior partner of the firm of solicitors that instructed him. Superimposed on all this is the clatter of the 2 typists generating an apparently endless stream of fee notes to go out in the last post. Charles Holborn pokes his head into the clerk's room and wonders if he'll be able to make himself heard. Dark, curly-haired, and described by his criminal clients as built like a brick shithouse, Charles is the odd man out in these chambers. Indeed, he's the odd man out in the Temple and the criminal bar generally. From a working-class family, the only barrister in Chambers ever to have been state-educated, he got into Cambridge by virtue of a scholarship, and perhaps the DFC earned as a wartime Spitfire pilot. Charles had what they call a good war, and it's been opening doors for him ever since. He watches with a smile as Sally, pert, cheeky Sally from Romford, politely tells Mr. Sebastian Campbell-Smythe, a senior barrister of 15 years' call, to return to his room and not to disturb her. Sally thinks Charles, and not for the first time, is ideally suited to life as a barrister's clerk. She's quick-witted and quick-tongued enough to keep in line 26 prima donna barristers, all her senior in years, supposed social status and intelligence, without actually crossing the line into rudeness. Stanley, the senior clerk, has high hopes of her. She turns towards the door and sees Charles. "Going to mix," he mouths, making exaggerated saucer and cup-lifting motions with his hands. She smiles. Notwithstanding Charles's education and carefully cultured accent, he's an East Ender like her, and there's something of an unspoken bond between them. "Don't forget the buggery," she says, as nonchalantly as if the case had been a vicar summonsed for careless driving. She reaches for the diary and runs her finger down it till she reaches his initials. 4:30, she calls. Charles nods. He's already read the case papers, and there's time for a cup of tea and a bite to eat at the cafe on Fleet Street before his client and the solicitor arrive for the conference. Pulling his coat around him, Charles steps out from Chancery Court into the rain. A gust of wind bows the bare branches of the plane trees towards him and threatens to dislodge his hat. He jams the hat more firmly on his head and walks swiftly across the shiny cobbles towards the sound of traffic. He still loves the sensation of time warp he experiences every time he walks through the archway from Dickensian Temple onto 20th century Fleet Street. The temple has barely changed in 300 years, and the sense that it's caught in a fold in time is always strongest in the winter, when mist regularly drifts in off the Thames and the gas lamps are still lit at 4 o'clock each afternoon by a man with what resembles a 6-foot matchstick. The benchers, responsible for running the inn, are debating the installation of electric lights, and Charles knows it's only a matter of time, but he'll miss the hiss of the gas, the fluttering flames and the shifting shadows. He turns onto Fleet Street and walks in the direction of St. Paul's Cathedral, its dome barely visible in the murky light, and pauses outside a small, steamy door. Pushing it open, he's greeted by a hot exhalation of bacon fat and cigarette smoke. Mick's offers cheap meals for 14 hours a day and is second home to both Fleet Street hacks and Temple barristers. Its all-day breakfast, a heart-stopping pyramid of steaming cholesterol for only 1 and 6, is legendary. Charles loves the place. The easy conversations and ribald jokes about cases, clients and judges. The tension of a long court day, particularly the miseries of an unexpected conviction or swingeing sentence, can here be assuaged in a fog of smoke and chip fat. Charles negotiates his way through the narrow gap between the tables towards the Formica counter and orders tea and toast. Turning round, he recognises a tall man sitting 2 tables away from him, hunched over a cup of tea. Charles goes to his table. "Thought it was you, Ozzy," says Charles, sitting down. The man starts and looks up sharply. Charles hasn't seen Ozzy Sinclair, the tall, lugubrious thief, for years. "I thought you were away," says Charles. "Weren't you doing a stretch?" "Fuck me," says Ozzy, his eyes widening, making the puffy bags under them bulge like half-crescent satchels. "Charlie Horowitz, as I live and breathe." "Charles Holborn now," corrects Charles, "for professional purposes." "Oh, yeah, sorry. I heard you was doing all right for yourself, Charlie." "I can't complain." "Well, good on you." Ozzy sighs. "Yeah, I was away. That bastard Milford Stevenson gave me 6 for 1 measly lorry." Charles doesn't share the thief's outrage. Now in his late 40s, Ozzy's been in and out of prison for offences of dishonesty since he was 13. With his record, 6 years for stealing a lorry full of condemned meat to sell to West End restaurants didn't seem excessive to him. "Yeah, I thought it was a bit steep," he says diplomatically. "But you're out now? On licence, I assume?" Ozzy nods. "So what brings you to this neck of the woods? Oh, you're not in trouble already?" Charles hitches a thumb over his shoulder towards the temple. "Seeing a brief?" Ozzy shakes his head. "No, nothing like that. Harry Robeson's given us some temporary work as an outdoor clerk. It's helped me with parole. I'm just dropping off some papers at some chambers." "Harry Robeson, eh?" There isn't a criminal lawyer in practice who doesn't know Harry Robeson, a villain's solicitor with a clientele that includes most of the serious criminals in South London. "Interesting case?" probes Charles. Like every barrister in the Temple, he's always keen to know where the quality work's going. "I can't tell you. All a bit hush-hush." Ozzy drops his voice and leans forward. "It's not a proper case yet, but it's going to be big." "What do you mean, not a proper case?" Ozzy taps his fleshy nose conspiratorially. "Can't say no more, except it'll be a cutthroat." A cutthroat defence is one where the prosecution knows that one of the accused did the deed, but can't prove which, and each defendant points the finger at the other. Charles likes them. They're usually as fun to prosecute as they are tricky to defend. Fair enough, he says, and they chat for a few minutes about old faces from the East End. Charles knocks back the dregs of his tea, pops a last bite of margarine-saturated toast into his mouth, and pushes back from the table. "Best be off," he says. "Keep lucky, Ozzy. And you, mate." Returning to chambers, Charles hears an argument in progress through the thick, centuries-old oak door. A tall barrister in pinstripe trousers, in mid-rant at Stanley, whirls round as Charles enters. "There you are. Now look here, Holborn," he says, using the formality of Charles's surname to demonstrate his displeasure. "This is positively the last time. I'm going to take it up at the next Chambers meeting." Charles looks up at the man. Lawrence Corbett is almost 6 inches taller than him, lean and fair. "Is there a problem, Lawrence?" he asks quietly, pointedly using Corbett's first name. "Yes, that," replies Corbett, jabbing his finger in the direction of the waiting room. "Your con's arrived, sir," explains Stanley patiently. "And?" asks Charles. "And my fiancée has been sitting waiting for me in there with that rapist of yours." "Yes?" inquires Charles. "Don't act the fool, Holborn. I know for a fact you've been asked by several members to keep your smutty clientele out of chambers during normal office hours." "Is my client with the instructing solicitor?" Charles asks Stanley. "Yes, sir. He's sitting between Mr. Cohen and his clerk. Mr. Smith's conference is waiting in there too, sir." "Well," continues Charles, turning to Corbett and quickly stepping backwards to allow Robert to scurry past with an armful of briefs, "I'd have thought it unlikely that your betrothed would be ravished in front of 5 witnesses, even assuming my client was interested in her, which I doubt. I'm sure you find her irresistible, but Mr. Petrovich is charged with buggering another male. He's not, if you'll excuse the pun, into women." Charles smiles. "That makes no difference at all, as you well know." "I'd have thought it would make quite a big difference, particularly to Mr. Petrovich. But if you'll let me go and start my conference," he says, "I can remove the evil influence from the room." Charles opens the door to leave, but pauses. "By the way, Lawrence, I know you don't do crime, but I'd have thought even you knew that a man's innocent till proven guilty. Mr. Petrovich isn't a rapist, or a bugger for that matter, till the jury says he is."